I never thought my marriage would end up like this. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here, questioning everything I thought I knew about Amanda, I would have laughed in their face. We've been married for 8 years. Sure, we had our ups and downs. What couple doesn't? But overall, I thought we were solid. At least, I did until recently. It started small, the way these things always do. Amanda began acting off. First, I chalked it up to stress. She's a therapist, and her clients can bring a lot of emotional baggage into her life. But this was different. She'd zone out mid-conversation, her eyes sort of unfocused, like she wasn't really there. She started taking long, late-night walks by herself, which wasn't like her at all. And then there was the laughter, quiet, strange giggles to herself when she thought I wasn't around. I asked her about it one night, keeping my tone casual so I wouldn't come off as accusing. "Is everything okay? You seem distracted lately." She just smiled, almost as if I'd said something funny. "I'm fine, Mark. Just working through some things." That should have been my first clue. Working through some things. It wasn't like Amanda to be vague. She always prided herself on being open and honest. But I let it go. I wanted to trust her. The Betrayal warning bell came about a month later. I was cleaning the living room while Amanda was out. She'd left her laptop on the couch, and as I moved it to dust, the screen lit up. I wasn't snooping, at least not at first. But a notification caught my eye. A calendar reminder for a private session with someone named Dr. Ellis. Dr. Ellis? I didn't recognize the name. Amanda had never mentioned seeing another therapist, and I couldn't help but wonder why. That night, I casually brought it up over dinner. "Hey, Amanda, who's Dr. Ellis?" A new colleague. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth, just for a second. But it was long enough for me to notice. Then she smiled way too quickly. "Oh, he's just someone I've been consulting for some new therapeutic techniques. Nothing major." Her tone was light, but her explanation didn't sit right with me. Amanda wasn't someone who kept secrets. Not before, anyway. The next few weeks were filled with more of the same. Late nights, strange absences, and a growing, gnawing suspicion that something was deeply wrong. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but something didn't add up. And then, one night, I found the first real clue. Amanda was in the shower, and her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I glanced at the screen out of habit. It was a message from a number saved as E. "Let's push deeper during your next session. I think you're ready to open yourself up completely." My stomach dropped. Who the hell was E? That message burned a hole in my mind all night. Push deeper? Open yourself up completely? What the hell was Amanda getting into? I tried to convince myself it was innocent, maybe some sort of wellness retreat or experimental therapy she hadn't mentioned yet. But deep down, I knew better. When Amanda came out of the shower that night, I acted normal, keeping my tone casual. "Hey, do you have any big plans tomorrow? You've been out late a lot recently." She hesitated just for a split second, but that moment was enough. "Oh, just a couple of errands. You know, the usual." That lie landed like a stone between us. She didn't even blink while saying it. I forced a smile and nodded, but my mind was racing. The next day, I decided to find out for myself. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd do, spying on my wife, but the feeling in my gut wouldn't let me rest. I worked from home that day, claiming I was too swamped to commute. Amanda left around noon, dressed a little too sharply for errands. I waited 10 minutes before grabbing my jacket and heading out. I kept my distance, careful not to draw attention as I followed her car. I told myself I was crazy, that I'd catch her at the grocery store or some mundane appointment, and I'd end up feeling like a paranoid idiot. But she didn't drive to the grocery store. She didn't even stay in town. Instead, she headed to a secluded office building just outside the city, a place I'd never seen before. I parked down the block and watched as she entered the building. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. I told myself to leave it alone, to drive back home and trust her. But then I saw the sign. Dr. Ellis, Hypnotherapy and Behavioral Coaching. Hypnotherapy? I couldn't explain why, but the sight of that word sent a chill down my spine. My heart was pounding as I got out of the car and walked toward the building. I told myself I was just looking, that I'd leave if I didn't see anything suspicious. But the closer I got, the harder it was to breathe. The door was locked, but there was a side window with the blinds slightly open. I peeked in, trying not to feel like some kind of creep. The room inside looked like a typical therapy office. Plush chairs, bookshelves, calming colors. But then I saw Amanda. She was sitting in one of the chairs, her posture completely relaxed, her head tilted back slightly. Across from her sat a man in a sleek black suit. His expression was calm, but his eyes held a strange intensity as he spoke to her. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but Amanda's lips were moving in response. The way she looked at him, her gaze soft and vulnerable, made my stomach churn. And then, out of nowhere, he leaned forward, his hand brushing hers. Amanda didn't pull away. In fact, she smiled, this warm, almost dreamy smile I hadn't seen in months. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I don't remember driving home. The whole way back, my mind was a blur of questions and accusations. What the hell was going on? Who was this guy to her? And what had he done to make her look at him like that? That night, I waited for Amanda to return, forcing myself to stay calm. When she walked through the door, her cheeks were flushed, her expression lighter than I'd seen in weeks. "How were your errands?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She glanced at me and shrugged. "Fine. Nothing exciting." Another lie. I knew then that I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to know exactly what was happening between her and this so-called Dr. Ellis. But most of all, I needed to know how far it had already gone. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Amanda sitting in that office, staring at Dr. Ellis with that soft, dreamy look. It wasn't just suspicion now, it was certainty. Something was happening between them, but I needed proof. Solid, undeniable proof. The next morning, Amanda left for work as usual, kissing me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. I waited until she was gone before I grabbed her laptop. My hands were shaking as I opened it and typed in her password. She hadn't changed it, thank God. I started with her emails but found nothing suspicious. Her inbox was filled with work correspondence and online shopping receipts. Next, I checked her calendar. There it was again. Private session with Dr. Ellis, scheduled every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 3 months. 3 months. That realization hit me like a brick. How had I not noticed? How had she managed to hide this from me for so long? But the calendar wasn't enough. I needed something concrete. Something that would tell me what was actually happening in those sessions. That's when I found the folder. It was buried deep in her desktop, labeled innocuously as self-reflection. My gut told me to click on it, and when I did, I found a series of audio files, each labeled with a date. They lined up perfectly with her sessions. My heart was pounding as I opened the first file. Dr. Ellis's voice came through the speakers, smooth and controlled. "Take a deep breath, Amanda. Let go of all your worries. You're in a safe place now." Amanda's voice was softer, almost distant. "Okay." The recording went quiet for a moment, just the sound of her breathing. Then Dr. Ellis spoke again. "Tell me, Amanda, what's been on your mind this week?" Her response was hesitant at first, but as the session went on, she opened up. She talked about feeling trapped, about needing to explore new sides of herself. And then, as the session neared its end, his tone shifted. "You're safe here, Amanda. You can let go. Say what you really want." There was a pause, and then she whispered, "I want to feel free. I want to feel desired." I felt a wave of nausea as I listened. The way she said it, it was like she was under some kind of spell. And Ellis, the bastard, was guiding her every step of the way. I clicked on the next file and the next, each one worse than the last. The sessions became more intimate, more invasive. He wasn't just her therapist. He was manipulating her, steering her thoughts and feelings. By the third recording, I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands trembling with rage. This wasn't just an affair. It was something darker, and I wasn't going to let it continue. By the time Amanda came home that night, I'd listened to enough recordings to piece together what was happening, or at least most of it. Dr. Ellis wasn't just guiding her. He was pulling her deeper into some twisted fantasy, convincing her that her life with me wasn't enough, that I wasn't enough. Amanda walked through the door, her face glowing like she didn't have a care in the world. She kissed me on the cheek, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Long day?" I asked, my voice even. "Yeah," she said, kicking off her shoes. "Just the usual." Another lie. She was getting good at those. I sat there on the couch, watching her move around the house like everything was fine. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, to throw her laptop in front of her and demand answers. But I stopped myself. If I played this wrong, she'd just deny everything. No, I needed to be smarter. That night, I lay awake in bed, listening to Amanda's soft breathing beside me. My mind raced as I thought about how to handle this. Confronting Ellis directly wasn't an option. Not yet. I didn't know what kind of man he was, but someone who manipulates women in the way he'd been doing wasn't likely to back down easily. The key was Amanda. I had to break whatever hold he had over her. And to do that, I needed to get inside her sessions. The next day, while Amanda was at work, I made my move. I called Ellis's office, disguising my voice as best I could. "Hi, this is Mark from Metrotech IT Services. We're performing routine security updates on all office computers in your building." I lied, praying the receptionist would buy it. "Can I confirm the time your office is available for maintenance?" There was a pause, and then she replied, Dr. Ellis has sessions until 6 p.m. Can you come after that?" "Perfect," I said, scribbling down the address and time. That evening, after Amanda left for one of her sessions, I grabbed my coat and drove to Ellis's office. I parked a block away and walked the rest of the distance, keeping to the shadows. The office building was mostly dark, except for a light glowing from Ellis's window. My heart raced as I crouched beneath it, peering inside. There they were. Ellis sitting in his chair, Amanda in hers, her head tilted back slightly as his calm, steady voice filled the room. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I didn't need to. Her body language said it all. She was completely under his control. I slipped around the side of the building, where I'd spotted a door marked, "Staff Only." To my surprise, it wasn't locked. My hands shook as I stepped inside, careful to make no noise. The hallway was dimly lit, with a door at the end marked, "Dr. Ellis, Private." I reached for the handle, but it was locked. Damn. Thinking quickly, I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the door and its lock. I didn't have the tools to pick it myself, but I knew a guy who could help. On my way out, I spotted something even better. A small plaque on the receptionist's desk that read Wi-Fi password, Ellis 123. I snapped a photo of that too, already formulating a plan. This wasn't just about catching Amanda anymore. It was about exposing Ellis for the manipulative predator he was. And if I was going to bring him down, I needed to go all in. That night, I could barely sit still. Amanda came home, acting like everything was normal, while my mind was a storm of plans and possibilities. She was humming in the kitchen, completely unaware of the battle I was gearing up for. I excused myself early, claiming I was tired, but I didn't sleep. I waited until she was out cold, then grabbed my laptop. The photo of the Wi-Fi password sat on my phone, a glaring opportunity. If I could connect to Ellis's office network, maybe I could find something, anything that would expose him. I typed in the password and held my breath. A second later, I was in. The network wasn't particularly secure. A folder labeled Session Archives caught my eye almost immediately. I clicked on it, and what I found made my blood run cold. Dozens of recordings, neatly organized by client name and date. My heart raced as I scrolled down the list, and there it was, Amanda Smith. My stomach churned as I clicked on her folder. Inside were video files from every session she'd had with Ellis. Each one was dated and timestamped, going back months. I downloaded a few at random, my fingers trembling. Part of me didn't want to see what was on those videos, but I needed to know. The first one I opened started innocently enough. Amanda sat in the same chair I'd seen through the window, her posture relaxed, her eyes half closed. Ellis's voice was calm, soothing. "You're in a safe place now, Amanda," he said. "Tell me, how do you feel?" "Light," she murmured. "Like I'm floating." "Good," he replied. "Now let's go deeper. What do you desire most in your life right now?" Her response was hesitant, like she was fighting to keep it inside. But after a few moments, she whispered, "Freedom. I want freedom." Ellis leaned forward, his voice soft but commanding. "And what does freedom look like to you, Amanda?" Her lips trembled. "A life where I don't feel trapped, where I can be myself." "And what's holding you back?" There was a long pause, and then she said it. "Mark," felt like a knife to my chest. The video went on, with Ellis encouraging her to explore those feelings, to imagine a life without limitations. He was planting ideas in her head, twisting her thoughts until I wasn't just her husband. I was her jailer. I slammed the laptop shut, unable to take any more. My breathing was shallow, my hands shaking with rage. This wasn't therapy. This was manipulation. He was grooming her, breaking down her trust in me so he could replace it with himself. The thought of confronting Amanda crossed my mind again, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't just about her anymore. Ellis was a predator, and I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I grabbed my phone and called an old friend, Chris. He worked in cybersecurity, and if anyone could help me dig deeper, it was him. "Chris," I said the moment he picked up, "I need your help, and it's big." "What kind of trouble are you in this time?" he asked, half joking. "It's not me. It's Amanda," I said. "There's this guy, her so-called therapist. He's manipulating her, Chris, and I need to take him down." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then he said, "I'm listening." I told him everything. The recordings, the videos, the strange hold Ellis seemed to have over Amanda. By the time I finished, Chris was dead serious. "Send me everything you've got," he said. "If this guy's dirty, I'll find it." For the first time that night, I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Ellis had taken something from me, but he'd made one critical mistake. He underestimated just how far I was willing to go to get it back. Chris didn't waste any time. By the next morning, he was already knee-deep in Ellis's files, sifting through everything I'd pulled from the network. I spent the day pretending everything was normal, laughing at Amanda's small talk, smiling through her distant kisses, while my phone buzzed with updates from Chris. By mid-afternoon, he called me. "Mark, this guy's more twisted than you think." "What do you mean?" I asked, stepping into the garage to avoid Amanda overhearing. "There's a pattern," Chris said, his voice low and tense. "Ellis doesn't just run a hypnotherapy practice. He preys on women clients specifically. I found emails and payments tied to other women, and it's not just Amanda. It's like he uses this therapy to manipulate them into emotional and physical dependency on him." I gritted my teeth. "What about Amanda? Did you find anything else?" Chris hesitated, which only made my stomach sink further. "Yeah, a lot. He's been recording all their sessions, even the ones he didn't upload to his archive. I found some deleted files. Luckily, they weren't fully erased. Mark, it's bad. He's not just screwing with her head. He's made her think she's in love with him." I felt the blood drain from my face. Chris continued, "But here's the kicker. He's got her under some kind of hypnotic suggestion. It's subtle, but he's trained her to respond to his voice. Certain phrases trigger her to let her guard down completely. It's classic conditioning." The thought of it made me sick. This wasn't just betrayal. This was manipulation on a level I couldn't have imagined. "Does she even know?" I asked, my voice breaking. "No," Chris said firmly. "Not consciously, anyway. But here's the thing, if we can prove what he's doing, we can destroy him. Legally, professionally, everything." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "What do we need to do?" Chris laid it out. We needed hard evidence, proof of Ellis's predatory methods, his manipulation of Amanda, and his track record with other women. Chris was already working on gathering as much as he could from Ellis's network, but I had a role to play too. "You need to get inside that office," Chris said. "If he's keeping physical records, notes, or any other incriminating evidence, We need it. And if you can plant a hidden recorder or camera, the more we have, the better. The idea of sneaking into Ellis's office made my skin crawl, but I knew it had to be done. This wasn't just about Amanda anymore. It was about stopping Ellis from ruining anyone else's life. That night, I told Amanda I had a work meeting the next day. She didn't even look up from her book as she nodded absently, her mind somewhere else. Good, I thought bitterly. It made my job easier. The next morning, I drove to Ellis's office, parking a block away like before. This time, I came prepared. A lockpick set Chris had lent me, along with a tiny camera disguised as a pen. My hands were shaking as I approached the back door, but adrenaline kept me moving. The lock wasn't as tough as I'd expected. Within a few minutes, I was inside, creeping down the dim hallway toward Ellis's private office. The place reeked of pretension. Leather chairs, mahogany furniture, a wall lined with self-help books bearing his smug face on the cover. I scanned the room quickly, looking for anything out of place. That's when I saw the safe. It was tucked behind a bookshelf, partially hidden but not enough to escape notice. My pulse quickened as I knelt in front of it, fumbling with the lockpick set. "Come on," I muttered under my breath, beads of sweat forming on my forehead. After what felt like an eternity, the lock clicked open. Inside, I found exactly what I'd hoped for: files. Thick, manila folders filled with notes, photos, and even receipts. My stomach churned as I flipped through them. One folder was labeled Amanda Smith. I opened it, and what I saw made my blood boil. Detailed notes about her sessions, personal details about our marriage, even transcripts of things she'd said under hypnosis. It was all there, a playbook for how he'd wormed his way into her mind. But it wasn't just Amanda. There were other names, other folders, each one documenting another woman he'd manipulated. I stuffed as much as I could into my bag, knowing I didn't have much time. Before leaving, I planted the hidden camera on a shelf near his desk, angling it toward the chair where his clients sat. As I slipped out of the office and back to my car, a single thought burned in my mind. This bastard wasn't just going to lose Amanda. He was going to lose everything. The drive home was a blur. My hands were still shaking, my mind racing with everything I just uncovered. That folder on Amanda, it was more than just an invasion of privacy. It was a roadmap of her destruction. Every doubt and fear she'd ever shared twisted into a tool for his control. When I got home, Amanda was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up when I walked in. "How was the meeting?" she asked, her voice casual. "Fine," I said, forcing my tone to match hers. "Just another day." I headed straight to the bedroom, locking the door behind me before pulling out the stolen files. I laid them on the bed, flipping through each one. Every word felt like another dagger in my chest. Session number 4. Expressed dissatisfaction in marriage. Explored feelings of emotional detachment. Session number 8. Suggested imagining life without current partner. Response was positive. Session number 13. Initiated physical touch during trance state. No resistance. I slammed the folder shut, rage boiling over. This wasn't just manipulation. It was a calculated assault on my life, on my marriage. And Amanda didn't even realize it. I called Chris immediately. "I've got the files," I said, my voice tight. "And you were right. This guy is worse than I thought." "Send me everything," Chris replied. "Photos, scans, whatever you can get. I'll start building the case." I spent the next hour photographing every page of every folder. Amanda knocked on the door once, asking if I was okay. I told her I was working on a project for work and needed some space. She didn't question it. When I finished, I sent everything to Chris and sat back, my mind spinning. The camera I'd planted would hopefully capture more evidence, but I already had enough to destroy Ellis's reputation. The real question was, what was I going to do about Amanda? She was a victim in all this, I reminded myself. Ellis had preyed on her vulnerabilities, twisting her thoughts until she believed she wanted him. But knowing that didn't erase the betrayal I felt. She'd let herself be led, let herself drift further and further away from me. I couldn't confront her yet, Not until I had everything I needed to break Ellis's hold on her. The next morning, Chris called with an update. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "Ellis isn't just a therapist. He's been running a side hustle, blackmailing some of his clients with the recordings from their sessions. That's why he keeps such detailed records. It's leverage. Blackmail." I repeated, the pieces falling into place. "Yep. And he's got financial records to prove it. Payments from at least 3 other women in exchange for keeping their secrets. I'm still digging to see if Amanda's on that list. But so far, it looks like he's been grooming her for something else entirely." I gritted my teeth. "I want this bastard ruined, Chris. Whatever it takes." "We're getting close," he assured me. "The files you sent are gold. Between those and the recordings from your camera, we'll have everything we need to blow this wide open." That night, I sat across from Amanda at the dinner table, watching her closely. She seemed lighter, almost happy, as if she had no idea her entire world was about to collapse. "What?" she asked, catching me staring. "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "You just look different." She smiled back, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt? Doubt? Couldn't tell. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control. The dominoes were lined up, and it was only a matter of time before they started to fall. Ellis thought he could destroy my marriage, manipulate my wife, and walk away unscathed. He had no idea what was coming. I barely spoke to Amanda over the next few days. Couldn't. Every time I looked at her, I saw the folder, the recordings, and the way Ellis had poisoned her mind against me. It wasn't anger anymore, it was heartbreak. Chris called me late one evening, his voice brimming with urgency. "Mark, the camera feed came through. You need to see this." He sent me a link to the video. I hesitated for a moment, bracing myself, before clicking on it. The footage showed Ellis's office during one of Amanda's recent sessions. She was sitting in the same chair, her posture relaxed, her eyes closed as Ellis spoke softly. "You're safe here, Amanda," he said, his voice smooth and hypnotic. "This is a space where you can be honest. Do you trust me?" "Yes," Amanda murmured. My jaw clenched as I watched him lean closer to her. "Good. Let's talk about Mark," he said. "You've been feeling like he doesn't understand you, haven't you?" "Yes," she whispered. "And that's okay," Ellis continued, his tone soothing. "It's natural to grow apart from people who don't meet your needs. Tell me, Amanda, do you feel happier here with me?" There was a long pause, and then she said, "I feel free." My stomach turned as Ellis placed a hand on hers, his voice dropping even lower. "You deserve to be free, Amanda. You deserve to feel wanted, loved. You deserve someone who truly sees you." She didn't pull her hand away. I couldn't watch anymore. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding in my chest. This was more than just manipulation. He was seducing her, breaking her down piece by piece until she saw him as her escape from me. The thought of confronting Amanda right then burned in my mind, but I stopped myself. I couldn't go in blind, not when she was still under his influence. I needed to break that connection before she could see what was really happening. The next morning, Chris called again with even more damning evidence. "Mark, I found a pattern," he said. "Ellis uses hypnosis to make these women dependent on him, and when they're completely under his control, he either blackmails them or pushes them into full-blown affairs. He's a predator, man. And I think Amanda is next on his list." That was it. I wasn't going to let this continue. "Can we use this in court?" I asked. "Absolutely," Chris said. "But if you want to stop this before it gets worse, you're going to need to make Amanda see the truth. And that's not going to be easy." He was right. Breaking Ellis's hold on her wouldn't be as simple as showing her the evidence. She was under his spell, convinced he was the solution to all her problems. I needed to snap her out of it, to force her to confront what was really happening. That night, I set my plan into motion. After dinner, I sat Amanda down in the living room, my heart racing. "There's something we need to talk about," I said, my voice steady. She looked at me, her expression wary. "What is it?" I hesitated, then placed my laptop on the table between us. I need you to watch this, I said, pulling up the video from Ellis's office. Her eyes widened as the footage played, her face going pale as she heard his voice, saw his hand on hers. What is this? She stammered, looking at me in disbelief. It's you, I said quietly. This is what's been happening in those sessions, Amanda. This is what he's been doing to you. She shook her head, her voice rising.
No.
This is taken out of context. He's helping me, Mark. He's manipulating you. I interrupted, my tone firm. He's been planting thoughts in your head, making you believe things about me, about us, that aren't true. Look at how he touches you, how he speaks to you. Amanda, this isn't therapy. This is control. Tears welled up in her eyes as she stared at the screen, the truth beginning to sink in. No, she whispered, her voice trembling. He's not like that. I placed the folder of his notes in front of her. Then explain this. Explain why he's been documenting your every thought, every vulnerability, like some kind of experiment. Amanda, he's not helping you. He's grooming you. She flipped through the papers, her hands shaking. The color drained from her face as the pieces started to come together. I didn't know, she murmured, her voice barely audible. I reached for her hand, my anger softening as I saw the pain in her eyes. Amanda, you've been manipulated. He used you just like he's used so many other women. But we can stop him. We can expose him for what he really is. For the first time in weeks, she looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the Amanda I used to know. The one who trusted me, who loved me. What do we do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We bring him down, I said, my resolve firm. Together. Amanda didn't say much after I showed her the evidence. She just sat there, staring at the folder in her lap, her lips trembling as tears silently streamed down her face. I didn't press her. I knew she needed time to process it all. I watched as the realization washed over her. How Ellis had preyed on her, twisted her insecurities, and turned her against me. But for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone anymore. The next morning, Amanda approached me in the kitchen. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying, but there was a fire in them I hadn't seen in a long time. You're right, she said quietly. He manipulated me. He made me believe things I never would have thought on my own. I nodded, keeping my voice calm. It's not your fault, Amanda. He's an expert at this, he's done it to other women too. But now that we know, we can stop him. How? She asked, her voice wavering. We go public, I said. We take everything we have, his recordings, his notes, the video footage, and make it impossible for him to keep hiding. We take this to the authorities, the licensing board, and his clients if we have to. But we expose him. Her hands gripped the counter, her knuckles white. What if he denies it? What if no one believes us? They'll believe us, I said firmly. We have the evidence. And if he tries to fight back, we'll be ready. Amanda hesitated, her eyes darting to the laptop on the table. There's something I need to tell you, she said finally. I stiffened, bracing myself. What is it? She looked away, guilt etched into her features. It wasn't just the therapy sessions. A couple of weeks ago, he kissed me. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Did anything else happen? No, she said quickly, shaking her head. I pushed him away. I told him it wasn't right. But then he made me feel like I was overreacting, like it was part of the therapy. I didn't know what to think. Mark, I didn't want to hurt you, so I just pretended it didn't happen. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. This wasn't about my anger, not right now. That's exactly how he works, Amanda. He makes you doubt yourself, makes you question your own feelings. But that kiss? That's physical proof of his intentions. It's another nail in his coffin. She looked at me, tears pooling in her eyes. Can you forgive me? I stared at her for a long moment, the weight of everything pressing down on me. This isn't about forgiveness, I said finally. This is about getting justice for both of us. And if you're willing to stand by me to help me bring him down, then we can rebuild. Together. She nodded, her expression resolute. I'm in. Whatever it takes. Over the next few days, Amanda and I worked with Chris to solidify our plan. Amanda agreed to schedule one final session with Ellis, this time wearing a hidden recording device. It was risky, but we needed more than just the existing evidence. We needed to catch him in the act, admitting to his manipulation. The day of the session, I couldn't sit still. Amanda was calm on the outside, but I could tell she was nervous. I'll be right outside, I told her as she grabbed her bag. The second you give me the signal, I'm coming in. She nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. I can do this, she said, more to herself than to me. When she left, I followed her at a distance, parking a block away from Ellis's office. Chris was on the phone with me, monitoring the live feed from the hidden camera I'd planted earlier. She's in, Chris said. Stay sharp. Inside the office, Ellis greeted Amanda with his usual polished charm. Good to see you, he said, guiding her to the chair. How are you feeling today? Nervous? She admitted, her voice trembling slightly. That's normal, he said, his tone soothing. Let's start by relaxing. Okay? Just take a deep breath and let everything else fade away. I listened through my earpiece, my jaw tightening as his voice filled the feed. You've been making great progress, Amanda, Ellis continued. I think you're finally ready to take the next step. What step is that? She asked, her voice shaky. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. Letting go completely, leaving behind everything that's holding you back, including Mark. My fists clenched as I heard Amanda's sharp intake of breath. What do you mean? She asked, playing along. You deserve to be free, Ellis said, his tone dripping with false sincerity. You deserve to be with someone who truly understands you, someone who can give you everything you need. And I think you know who that is. That was the moment Amanda gave the signal. Mark was right about you, she said, her voice steady now. You're a predator. What? Ellis froze, his confident mask slipping. The door flew open, and I stepped inside, my phone raised, already recording. Game over, Ellis. Ellis's face turned pale when he saw me standing there, the phone in my hand capturing everything. For the first time, his polished, composed demeanor cracked. What is this? He stammered, his voice rising. You can't just barge in here. I stepped further into the room, my voice cold and steady. Oh, I think I can. See, I've been on to you for weeks, Ellis. I know exactly what you've been doing to Amanda, and to all your other victims. He blinked, his eyes darting between me and Amanda, who had risen from the chair. Her expression was no longer confused or vulnerable. It was hard, resolute. You manipulated me, she said, her voice trembling with anger. You made me doubt myself. You made me doubt my husband. And you called that therapy? Ellis raised his hands, trying to regain control. Amanda, please. You're misunderstanding everything. These sessions were meant to help you explore your feelings, to... Bullshit. I snapped, cutting him off. I've seen the files, Ellis. The notes. The recordings. This wasn't therapy, you were grooming her. Just like you've done to countless other women. His composure broke completely then. You don't know what you're talking about, he spat, his tone shifting from calm to defensive. You can't prove anything. I smirked, holding up my phone. You're wrong about that. I've got plenty of proof. Audio recordings, video footage, and a whole folder of your notes that you were dumb enough to keep in your safe. Ellis's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. Those are private, he hissed. You had no right. You had no right, Amanda interrupted, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. You had no right to invade my mind, to twist my thoughts, to make me question everything I've ever known. You took my fears, my insecurities, and used them against me. Well, guess what? I'm not afraid of you anymore. Ellis took a step toward her, but I immediately moved between them, my glare stopping him in his tracks. This is how it ends, Ellis, I said. You're done. We're taking this to the authorities, the licensing board, and every single one of your victims. You're not going to ruin anyone else's life. His bravado faltered, fear flashing in his eyes. You don't understand, he said, his voice desperate now. I was helping her. I was. Save it for the judge, I snapped, shoving past him to grab Amanda's hand. Come on. We're done here. As we walked out of the office, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. Ellis stood frozen, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. The moment we stepped outside, Amanda collapsed against me, her body trembling with relief. It's over, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. It's finally over. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close. Yeah, I said quietly. It is. Chris was waiting for us back at the house, his laptop open and files spread out on the dining table. How'd it go? He asked, glancing up as we walked in. Better than expected, I said, showing him the video I'd recorded. He didn't even try to deny it, just fell apart as soon as we confronted him. Chris grinned. Perfect. With this and the other evidence, he doesn't stand a chance. Amanda sat down heavily, her hands gripping the edge of the table. What happens now? She asked. Now, Chris said, leaning forward. We take all of this to the authorities. The licensing board will revoke his license, and we can press charges for manipulation and assault. Once his other victims hear about this, they'll come forward too. He won't have anywhere to hide. I nodded, determination hardening in my chest. Let's do it. Amanda and I sat together on the couch, the silence between us heavy but not uncomfortable. I'm sorry, she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. For everything. I looked at her, my expression softening. It wasn't your fault, I said. He took advantage of you, but you're free now, Amanda. We both are. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Thank you for not giving up on me. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly. We'll get through this. Together. For the first time in months, I believed those words. The following morning, Chris filed everything. He sent the recordings, the stolen files, and even Ellis's financial records to the licensing board and the police. This is airtight, he assured me. He's not walking away from this. Amanda, still shaken, asked, what if he tries to fight it? Chris smirked. He'd be an idiot to try. That same day, we got confirmation. Ellis's office was raided. His files and computers were seized. Amanda watched the news coverage in silence, her hand gripping mine tightly. Does this mean it's over? She asked softly. Almost, I said, but we're getting there. 2 days later, Ellis's arrest hit the news. Fraud, professional misconduct, and coercion. The headline called him a disgraced hypnotherapist. Amanda and I sat together as the story unfolded on TV. Former clients were already coming forward, sharing stories of manipulation and blackmail. They're speaking up, Amanda said, her voice wavering. I'm not the only one. You're not, I reassured her. And now the world knows what he really is. For the first time in months, I saw a flicker of peace in her eyes. Amanda decided to come forward as one of Ellis's victims. It wasn't an easy choice, but she said, if I stay silent, he wins. Her testimony was powerful. She shared how Ellis had manipulated her, twisted her thoughts, and nearly destroyed her marriage. The other victims rallied behind her. Their voices combined into a force that made it impossible for Ellis to hide. As we left the courthouse that day, Amanda squeezed my hand. Thank you, she said, tears in her eyes, for saving me. You saved yourself, I replied. Ellis's trial was swift. With the mountain of evidence and testimonies from Amanda and other victims, his defense crumbled. The verdict came in, guilty on multiple counts of professional misconduct, coercion, and fraud. He was sentenced to years in prison, his career and reputation in ruins. Watching the judge read the sentence, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Amanda gripped my arm tightly, her expression a mix of relief and sorrow. It's over, she whispered. Finally, I said, letting out a long breath. In the weeks after the trial, Amanda and I began to rebuild. It wasn't easy, trust doesn't return overnight, but we were trying. She started therapy with a legitimate counselor, someone who helped her process the manipulation and guilt. I went to a few sessions too, working through my own anger and pain. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, Amanda turned to me. "I know I can't erase what happened," she said, her voice steady. "But I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that we're worth fighting for." I nodded, the tension in my chest easing just a little. "We'll take it one day at a time," I said. And for the first time in months, I believed we had a chance.